in the heart of the 1960s, Nigeria was torn apart by civil war. Biafra, led by Colonel Chukwuemeka OJUKWU, declared its independence from Nigeria. The war that followed is a story of pride, resistance, and immense suffering, shaping the history of the Igbo people and Nigeria forever. But decades later, the legacy of OJUKWU remains as contested as it was in his time. OJUKWU's legacy is revisited and debated. But what do we really know about the man who led a nation into battle? And why are his actions still so fiercely discussed? In a controversial statement, Paul Onwubiko claimed that OJUKWU ran to exile, running to save his life in the hands of the Igbo people. This assertion, suggesting OJUKWU fled out of fear of the very people he led, has sparked heated discussions and criticism. Onwubiko's assertion is a misrepresentation. It is important to understand that OJUKWU's decision to go into exile was not driven by fear of the Igbo people, but by the political and military circumstances surrounding his downfall. After Biafra's defeat, OJUKWU sought refuge in Ivory Coast, a nation that had long been sympathetic to the Biafran cause. To suggest that he fled out of fear of his own people is to oversimplify the complex political dynamics of the time. Yet, this claim continues to gain traction among some. One individual, in particular, has become a vocal defender of this narrative, accusing others of failing to properly understand history. You see, many of you jumble up issues, thinking you can just make irrelevant, inconsequential points to justify your narrative. I challenge you to name the sources that claim OJUKWU fled because of the Igbo people. What history are you drawing from? Who told you that? Chukwuemeka OJUKWU's journey, from a colonial officer to the leader of Biafra, was fraught with challenges. His decision to enter exile was a painful one. After the war ended in 1970, Biafra had fallen. But was his exile truly an escape from those who once supported him, or was it a strategic withdrawal to safeguard his life? The end of the war saw OJUKWU's fall from power. In the eyes of many, he was a hero, a leader who fought for the survival of his people. To others, he was a failure, a man who led his people to war and then fled when they needed him most. The narrative that OJUKWU ran to exile oversimplifies the complexities of his leadership. Yes, there were internal divisions and conflicts. Yes, some of the Igbo elite were critical of his leadership during and after the war. But to suggest that OJUKWU fled because of some supposed wrath from the Igbo people disregards the reality of the situation. His exile was about survival, not about fear of his own. A passionate response from one critic of this narrative insists that the person making such claims lacks a fundamental understanding of history. He criticizes the individual for using popular figures like OJUKWU as rhetorical tools, trying to align themselves with the struggles of the past without fully understanding the context. You can't invoke history just to win a debate. OJUKWU's story is not yours to misrepresent. And certainly, you cannot compare yourself to him, or Nnamdi Kanu, thinking that their mistakes will be ignored simply because you are standing on their shoulders. History doesn't work like that. The comparison between OJUKWU and contemporary figures like Nnamdi Kanu remains a controversial topic in Biafran discussions. Some see Kanu as a modern-day OJUKWU, leading the charge for Biafran restoration. But is the comparison valid? Does the current generation truly understand the sacrifices made by OJUKWU, or are they merely repeating past mistakes? The Igbo proverb, "A rat that jumps into a river with a lizard cannot expect to be as dry as the lizard," is often quoted in these debates. The saying reminds us that actions have consequences and that one cannot expect the same results as another when they face different challenges. When we invoke history, we must acknowledge that we are not in the same position as OJUKWU, Kanu, or anyone else who has stood for the Biafran cause. We are different people, in a different time. And we must be mindful of how we approach these figures, understanding the full scope of their actions and the consequences they faced. So the history of Biafra is far from simple. OJUKWU's legacy, just like that of other historical figures, is a subject of constant reinterpretation. What we must ask ourselves is this: are we learning from the past, or are we simply repeating its mistakes? As we continue to seek answers, one thing remains clear: understanding history is not about invoking it for convenience, but about learning from it. This documentary is dedicated to those who seek truth, understanding, and unity in the ongoing quest for justice and remembrance. May we always remember the lessons of the past as we build a future together.